So I love how you creatards want to inject your brain poison into the secular school system, even though it's been ordered by the Constitution of the United States to keep a separation between church and state. Schools, mainly public schools, are state-run institutions, which means that you'll probably never see your religious pseudoscience anywhere near a classroom. I had a, you know, I hear Christians constantly telling me, well, this was, science and religion are, they came out about the same time. No, they didn't actually. Religion was around for a few thousand years before sciences were actually really ever developed. Before that, it was, alchemy. And before that, it was, basically agricultural science, which is still a science today because we need agriculture in order to survive. On the whole issue, whenever I have these debates with Christians, mainly Christians, because that's the demographic in the United States, a high population density of Christians. So I have these conversations with them, and it always starts out civil. I say, well, I don't believe that. I don't think that that's demonstrably true. And just because, then they'll say, oh, well, so many billions of people believe it. But that doesn't make it true either. That's what they call argumentum ad popularum. It doesn't mean anything. It's garbage. That's a falsehood. It's a weak argumentative stance, because how are you going to prove it? How are you going to prove that's true because a bunch of people believe it? And the arguments from ignorance, which is like, oh, well, it's been around for so many thousands of years, so that means it must be true. Well, the Upanishads have been around for like 15,000 years, and you're going to say, well, my religion is truer than theirs because Judaism was the first religion on earth. It wasn't. The first religion that we know of came from the Neanderthals, and we don't even have a name for it. And then to follow in succession, you have, pre-Hindu beliefs, whatever, Zoroastrian beliefs, Jainism, things like that. Hinduism and Buddhism grew up right next to it. They grew right alongside each other. And Buddhism has been around just as long as Hinduism, which is probably about 2,000 to 3,000 years longer than Christianity. Judaism even. And I think actually, if you were to present, you're gonna go back in time a few thousand years, and you're gonna present Christianity to a place that already has written systems. Because Christianity didn't have a written system until after the first century AD. You're talking about oratory tradition that got locked into the pages of a book. But just because it's written down doesn't mean it's true. And it's not that I'm not saying that the Upanishads or Buddhism is any truer or more factual in basis than Christianity, because they're not. There's what they call the rational world, and there's the imagined world. Rationality entails using my five senses. And I've heard Christians say, well, you're not being rational. Of course I'm being rational, because I'm using my five senses as opposed to thinking that something is true because I was told so, or because my parents held it as true, or because there's like a long tradition of my family going to church and mingling with other people of the faith. There's so many arguments that are just fallacious and what I call logical fallacies. you know. And now it's not that Christians aren't using logic, because you can go from point A to point B, and that's what logic is when you can relate point A to point B. Well, you can only relate point A to point B within the religion. Now, if I'm talking about science, I have to go through all these steps to get to point B, and from point A to point B, because I have to first demonstrate what it is that I'm thinking, instead of just asserting that I know. Because I was told so by my pastor or by my parents, or by my grandparents, people who grew up in a time when theism was the order of the day. And many of the religious creationist arguments against evolution, against science, come from like I can't remember his name, but he was some dude like 250, 300 years ago when Darwin was around. When Darwin came up with the theory of evolution, this creationist jumped on it right away and said, well, blah blah blah, it doesn't explain anything. Well, it does explain things. It explains things in a naturalistic tone, as opposed to the spiritual tone, which cannot be proven in the rational physical world. Now, you can use reason to be a theist, whatever you want to call yourself. Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, whatever. You have reason. It doesn't mean you have a reason. It just means you have, reason, because you're reasoning that something is true. You're using your form of reason to assert that something is true. Now, there's logic, though. It's not, like I said, logic is a way, is a system that we use to convey the meaning of something that relates. If my argument's going to go from point A to point B, I have to use logic in order to explain point A and relate it to point B. Now, I've had Christians tell me evolution is a belief. Why do you believe it? It's not that I believe it, it's that I accept it. Because it's a naturalistic explanation, and it explains what's going on in this realm of existence, in this reality. Afterlife, all that spiritual stuff is over here. Way over here somewhere. And the scientific world, you have evolution, which is way over here somewhere. But at least with evolution, it's a more understandable explanation. If I just say that, well, God did it, that doesn't explain anything. All that does is give me the excuse not to learn anything. I've had these debates the last couple of days, guys talking about, I know more about evolution than you do. I say, I never fucking claimed to know anything. That's you guys. You're the ones who claim to know shit. I'm not that arrogant. I'm going to say, well, I understand both sides. I used to be a Christian, so I understand your side of the argument. I'm not a Christian anymore because you guys are nuts. But evolution, I also understand evolution. I understand it. It doesn't make me a fucking expert. And when I'm talking to these Christians, they're like, well, explain how you know it. I never said I knew it. And then you're going to say, well, you're an atheist because you believe in evolution. Evolution and atheism are not intrinsically linked. And you're going to try to surmise or assume that because I reject your idea as gospel or absolute truth, that I'm an atheist. I never claimed to be an atheist. I never claimed to know anything. I just, I would go so far as to say that, I don't assume to know anything. Assumptions are like, They're just whims, guesses. That's what an assumption is a guess. Not a guesstimate, which would be called an educated guess. I'm educated to a degree. I'm not completely educated, but you seem to think that someone needs to be an expert in order to explain what they understand. I understand something. It doesn't make me an expert. I didn't go to school to become an evolutionary scientist, though I had to study it in high school and college and in places where accredited sciences are accepted. And so the debate started over, well, I think creationism belongs in scientific classes because, that's the other explanation and all sides need to be taken seriously. No, they don't. The sides that need to be taken seriously are the ones that are openly demonstrable in a laboratory situation, or that can be shown as logical and not as logical fallacy. To assert that I know something is a logical fallacy. Say God did it is a logical fallacy because it does not relate to point B. Point B being, that it belongs in schools. And if you were going to put it in schools, I think probably the best place to put it would be in, agricultural history, or maybe developmental psychology, something like that. Because as we evolve, our understanding of nature and theism and all these things tend to branch out, and they openly reject it without ever doing any kind of actual research. I say why don't you go? I said to this guy, why don't you go study evolution? Why don't you go do some research? He said, oh, I don't have to because I listen to Kent Hovind, and Kent Hovind is a chemistry PhD, not a paleontologist. Not an archaeologist. And he always claims to know that, the Earth is 6,000 years old. Bishop Ussher was a fucking 300, 400, 500 years ago. Bishop Ussher, a poor mathematician, mind you, added all these ages in the Bible together and surmised that the Earth was only so many thousands of years old, without any kind of scientific evidence to support the idea. It was just a thought that maybe, oh, well, I'm right because this is, divine credence and things like that. That's bullshit. At least we can show you something when we're talking about evolution. We can show you. We can prove it. This guy said, well, prove evolution. I said, well, okay. There was an experiment done back in the 80s where they took two different types of shrimp, and they were large oceanic shrimp. One was from warm water, and when shrimp are in warm water, they turn red, by the way. And then they took a shrimp from cold water, and they are blue. And they put them in alien environments. They took the blue cold water shrimp and put it in warm water. And within a few hundred generations, because shrimp die, they don't live very long lives, and but they also, they also deliver a lot of progeny. So within a few hundred generations, the blue shrimp turned red, and it began to suit the environment. While they didn't live very long in the alien environments until they were able to adapt. So, one instance, one example I had to give them was, in the plague, the bubonic plague, when people were dying from that, there were a few individuals that had immunities, were able to create immune responses to the disease, and they passed on that genetic trait to their offspring. And then on down the line, hundreds of years later, there are people that are carrying around that gene. And that gene, the gene that gives them the immune response to the plague, actually also creates immune responses to AIDS. because AIDS and the bubonic plague are related. Not that they're the same disease, they're just related. Now, and it's not like any kind of theist is going to buy what I'm saying. It's not that I'm trying to sell you anything anyway. I'm just explaining what I think. And what I think I know is not important. And I'm not going to claim that there's no God either. That would just be fallacious, because I can't prove otherwise that there is one, or that there is not one. So, whoever watches this, like the Christ Hards, that's what I like to call you people. If you're watching this, I am not a full-fledged atheist. I'm not even like a moderate atheist. I still hold some small smidge of a belief in God, only because I can't reject the idea totally. And I had a chance to study all these religions and stuff, and I found that they're all pretty much the same, in the sense that they rely on mental processes as opposed to the physical. And then the Christians want to say, well, that's just a theory. You don't even know what a theory is. You talk shit about things you don't understand, and then you listen to your pastors, and you listen to these, quote, creation scientists. They're not fucking scientists. That's why they're not, like, taken seriously by the rest of the scientific community, because they have no fucking proof to back up their statements. You can talk shit all fucking day. That's not going to prove your argument. You can sit there. I've had this happen too, where I'm talking to them, and we're having a civil conversation. All of a sudden, they say they start attacking my character. They attack my they insult my intelligence. They attack everything that they can attack in order to prove their point, but that's not doing anything. All that's doing is making them look like smug assholes. Ignorant smug assholes. And I'm not going to claim to know anything. That's you guys. That's the Christians. That's the theists. They always claim to know something. What the fuck do you know? In fact, it's been proven that nobody can really know anything. You just have a level of understanding of certain subjects. So, before you talk shit, at least do a little bit of research. Read into the other side of the debate. Because if you're not going to even take the time to research the other side, the other guy's argument, you are going to have a one-sided debate. So don't even call it a debate. Call it a theistic argument. It's not a debate. It only becomes a debate when you can be civil on both sides. The atheists generally tend to be more civil because they do not assert. They do not force the opinion. That's what religion is. It's an opinion. It's not a fact. A theory itself, by itself, is not a fact. A theory is a body of facts which support the hypothesis. Now, I can sit here and explain this to you guys all day long, but you're not going to listen, because all you have in your head is this garbage that some fucking asshole pastor put in there. There's some dickhead preacher that doesn't want you to think for yourself. He wants you to think for him, because he's got what I like to call CPS, chronic pedestal syndrome. Every time he gets another follower, he's just another notch up higher on his fucking pedestal. The podium just gets a little bit taller. And he feels a little bit more important. And as his people leave, as they find that this isn't really a realistic way of looking at the world, he becomes more and more disenfranchised, more and more angry, and he'll start to become public with his opinions instead of just leaving it in the church where it belongs. Trying to force it on children. Oh, you'll go to hell if you don't believe me. That's bullshit. That's a childish way to prove your point. That's not proving anything. All that's doing is making you look retarded. So, it's not that I don't believe in your hell and stuff like that. I can't prove it. So I don't believe it, not outright. In fact, I never believed in hell. I don't think that, the God that you paint as being just and merciful and ecumenical and all this stuff. I don't think that that is the God that I would want to worship. The God of the Old Testament, which I've seen New Testament Christians defend, was ignorant. He was an ignorant ass. He didn't know that the earth was not flat. That the earth, God, as it says in the Bible, the words in red are God's language, that it's divinely inspired by God. Well, if God were this all-knowing, omniscient character, wouldn't he know that the earth was round and that the sky was not made out of metal and space not full of water? That's a logical question. It's not a fallacy. It doesn't come from fallacy. That comes from me judging an idiot. Oh, thou shalt not judge. Well, I can judge bullshit from fact. And he says, oh, well, if you know so much, this guy I'm debating with, if you know so much, explain your stance or defend your position. I said, I don't have to defend my position because I don't feel like I need to. It's not. You're the one who is proposing indefensible positions, some positions that cannot be verified outside of the debate. And so you can continue to talk shit, or you can go get an accredited education, not like Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind's a fucking charlatan. He's actually been found to be a proven liar and an embezzler. Don't listen to Kent Hovind. Don't listen to Ray Comfort or P.P. Simmons or any of those other creatard motherfuckers. They don't have any idea what the fuck they're talking about. They want to force their religious opinion on you. And it does not belong in schools. It does not belong in schools. Ever. In fact, I don't even think it belongs in society. I've written to people and I've said to them that, if I could, I would eradicate the idea. I would slowly force it out of society if I could. If I could. Which I can't because you people hold the opinion so tightly. And then you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, Hitler was an atheist. No, Hitler was a Protestant or Lutheran or something like that. German, so he's probably, or Austrian, whatever, it's close to Germany, probably a Lutheran. So a lot of the things that you're going to say are just based on something that you have done research on. You just talk shit. Just talk shit. Talk shit. Talk shit. No, I don't have to do research because God told me I don't have to. Well, how did God tell you? Well, it's in the Bible. Well, how is that proof of anything? Well, it says right here in the Bible. Fuck the Bible for a second. Just fuck it. Just leave it alone for a second. Tell me how you know what you're saying is true. And then they'll say, oh, well, my pastor, he said that, I can't reject the idea because if I do, I'll go to hell. Well, that doesn't prove that you're right either. That just proves your pastor's an asshole. Like I had one guy, he said, oh, my pastor tells me that I can practice evolution all I want, or I can believe in evolution all I want, but I don't choose to. Well, who are you listening to then? How old do you think the Earth is? You're 6,000 years old. Fucking goddamn, that's retarded. We even have proof that we've been selectively breeding dogs for 25, 30,000 years. We have, different forms of carbon dating, not the 1976 version of the machine, which the Christians want to sit there and drag out. Well, that's just an old science. No, it's not, because we improve upon it all the time, and that's what science is about. Improving the theory. So, just get an education, man. Just get an education. Not a biblical education, a real education. Biblical education is not an education because you're relying on 2,000 plus dead savages. 2,000 plus year dead savages. They've been dead for so many centuries. And you're going to say that, oh, well, they're right because, this predates science. Well, absolutely fallacious. Because their naturalistic explanation had to do with God, had to do with things that they didn't understand. Lightning came from God. Plate tectonics were a force of God. God was angry, the earth would rumble, lightning bolts would come out of the sky and strike houses and people and things like that. That's not scientific. It's not scientific, it's not educational. Those people interpreted the world in an ignorant fashion. That does not mean they are correct. And then they say, oh, well, I said there's a difference between acceptance and belief. And then they say, oh, well, no, there's not. It's absolutely no difference between acceptance and belief. Yes, there is, actually, because I can accept a lie. It does not mean I have to believe it. In that context, they are not related to each other at all. So stop talking shit, get an education, and drop the whole, if you don't believe me, you'll go to hell argument, because it's not really aiding it's not supporting your stance, man. It just makes you look like a fucking ass. So that's about all I got for you, man. Just shut up and do some research, please. I'm begging you, so that we can have an intelligent debate instead of you just firmly holding one stance and not being able to explain the other side of it. I went to church for 25 fucking years. I was a Bible-thumping, hardcore Bible-thumping idiot. Church idiot, creates hard, whatever you want to call it. That's what I was. So, when I got a real education and I started to read about the other religions and, took philosophy classes, in fact, I studied other things outside of my major. I would go into the library every day and study medical science and different philosophies. And philosophy and religion are two different things, by the way, because philosophy can be a personal thing. So, and not just a widely accepted theory, because you have religious theory, because that's what that is. It's a theory, but not in the same way that scientific, not in the same sense of a scientific theory, not in that sense. But, a scientific theory actually has a body of facts, where religious theory is just a bunch of guesses, uneducated guesses, really. So don't talk shit anymore. Just don't. If you're going to talk shit to me, at least bring your A game and stop trying to hit me on illogical statements like, oh, you must be from Australia. That's the one I got just the other day. Oh, you must be from Australia. I said, well, what the fuck does my ethnicity have to do with our argument? Well, it just turns out that all the stupid people come from Australia. I was like, oh, so you're racist, as opposed to, alongside of being ignorant. Oh, I'm not racist. Well, that was a racist statement. All the stupid people come from Australia is a racist thing to say. At this day and age, I think that we were all, we could all be considered one race. We're just slightly genetically different from one another. Our adaptations change the colors of our skin. You don't want to buy into that explanation, because you want to listen to Ken Hovind and Ray Comfort and P.P. Simmons and other assholes like that. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They assert, they claim to know what they're talking about, but they can never prove it, because all they can use to defend their stance is words. Words are bullshit by themselves. That's it. That's what I got for you. You have a beautiful day. I'm sure there are comment sections, and you can like it or dislike it or whatever. I don't really give a shit. But at least entertain the idea that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.